tension, balance, always going to be juxtaposed with each other. And we just don't need to question, well, why is this happening now? Which I tend to want to do.
Sure.
I think, oh my goodness, I want to just enjoy this moment. And why is this other thing happening? But that's just how life is.
Mm-hmm. Well, grab your cappuccino or your espresso for this podcast episode. You are going to be just in for such a treat to hear from Angela Correll, who is actually doing this live recording from Tuscany. What a gifted writer, gifted speaker, woman who chases after beauty and reflects that beauty through doing renovations with properties, as well as her beautiful words as such a gifted author. So thanks for being here. And you are going to be so excited that you put those AirPods in today to listen to Angela's story. Welcome to the Generous Girl podcast. It's wonderful to have you all here. And I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today, Angela Correll. And if you've been in bookstores recently or seen her book on Amazon, you'll recognize her. Her book is called Restored in Tuscany, a true story of facing loss, finding beauty, and moving forward with hope. It's a travel memoir. So I can't wait to unpack with you all listeners how she wrote the story, why she wrote this story. And she is a busy woman. She's a co-founder of Kentucky Soaps and Such and the Stanford Inn, the Bluebird Restaurant, Esther's Wellhouse Spa, and other businesses that are included in Wilderness Road Hospitality. So we're going to also talk about why she's so passionate with hospitality and how generosity is such a component of hospitality. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, Kim. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, well, if you're watching on YouTube, you can kind of see the background of the old stone wall that Angela is sitting against in Tuscany right now. So I love that. It's great. So thank you. And I'd love for you to just actually start with this concept of generosity being so deeply tied together with hospitality, because I know that's so woven throughout your story.
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about that lately because we do a lot of hospitality. We love hospitality. We've been on the receiving end of hospitality, and hospitality costs somebody something. I mean, you can't, if you have someone in your home, there's time involved, there's maybe some expense, there's something involved when you really truly do it for the other person. And so I do feel like that generosity is actually the core of that. It's almost like, in my opinion, generosity is kind of the trunk of the tree, and hospitality is one of the branches, a big branch. And so I just think that you really can't, you can hardly even have one without the other.
Right, right. That's beautiful. Well, you remind me of the podcast I did with your friend also, Ash Marsh, and her belief in the power of hospitality as well, and how they're building that whole center in Alabama to help people who've kind of been burned in the hospitality industry and allow them to be restored and poured into so they can go back out and continue to serve. And I remember her phrase of hospitality is thinking of the person before they got there and just kind of anticipating what that person might need to be blessed, and showing that you really put that thought ahead of time into their visit.
Yes, anticipation is a big one. In fact, there's a saying here in Italy, when if you call a restaurant and make a reservation, they'll say aspettiamo, and that means we wait. And I find that so fascinating because it's like they're just waiting for our arrival. And obviously we know they're busy doing lots of things, but just the idea of anticipation, the idea of preparation and then of course generosity and just thinking about how can you serve the other person.
Right, right. Oh, so beautiful. Well, your book is called Restored in Tuscany. So I want to unpack how you got to that point of actually buying a place in Italy, restoring it, and offering that as a place, like you're saying, for beautiful hospitality. But before we get to that point, how about you catch everybody up on your family side of things, and who you married, and what your family's been doing for these years in Kentucky, where is really your home
Okay.
base.
It is our home base. Jess and I, my husband and I, are both seventh generation Kentuckians, so we have deep roots there. And I met Jess on a blind date when I was single and 32, never been married. Jess had been married, and his marriage had dissolved, and he had 3 teenage children. And so a friend set us up, and of course, when you're single, it wasn't exactly what I had in mind. I thought thought I would probably meet somebody never been married, didn't have children, but it's just amazing how the Lord works through creating a path that may not be what you think it is or should be, but yet is so much more beautiful than you could imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And so we married, and the three teenagers have a very involved and active mother. So I get to be the second mom, which has been really
Oh.
fun, and love them. I can't imagine loving them anymore if I can't imagine that. And then now I've got 5 grandchildren, and it's just a joy. So it's been a real joy for me to experience that. I've not had any of my own, but I feel like I have been able to, biologically, I should say, but I probably have been able to embrace my kids and my grandkids even more in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. So that's been just a joy, just pure joy. And my husband's in banking and insurance and kind of real estate. He's just an entrepreneur. And
Mm-hmm.
he's also on the board of the National Christian Foundation. And we've been involved in generous giving for many, many years. And it's been very impactful in our lives and our generous journey, I would say, generosity journey. We've loved all the people that we've met through that process. And one of the things we've done is do the revitalization of a small Kentucky town. So we spent some time doing that, kind of working on that together. And so that's kind of what sort of brought us to the point of, we always have loved to travel, have traveled to Italy for 6 years. On our honeymoon was the first time that I came to Italy. So
Oh.
it's been a special place for us, really, from the very beginning, and brought our family here several times, even before we ever considered buying a place. It's just been a special place for us.
Oh, so beautiful. And I was able to watch the generous giving video with the story with you and your husband. And I remember him talking about, the close relationship he had with his brother, who passed away at a really young
Mm-hmm.
age. And through that friendship and sibling relationship, understanding just the power that of generosity in your business, and how he really wanted to put God first and be as successful
Yes.
as possible, but then lead with faith and family. And um, that was when it was actually John and Ash Marsh who reached out to me. So grateful for their connection. But John said, I really think you should have Angela, on the podcast. And it's just such a blessing, I think, when you are so gifted, as an entrepreneur, and, God's given you the ability to start these different businesses and things, but you're putting him at the helm and allowing him to write that story, and looking at how, like you said, like you went to Italy on your honeymoon, and now fast forward all these years later, you are now doing a podcast about the place that you purchased, and you wrote a book about it. But that's just the beauty of God. And, he captures these little things in our hearts where we never know how that seed is going to take sprout, but it does. I feel like we look back and we go, oh yeah, I remember that. I didn't know if anything would come from that. And 20 years later, you're looking at this entire beauty that emerges.
It's crazy. It's crazy good.
Crazy good. I
Yeah,
know.
crazy good.
I've heard another phrase, messy beautiful. And I think that's
Yes.
also nice.
Organized chaos.
Organized chaos. Yes. Or addicted to chaos. So,
Yeah.
so tell the story, which I want the reader to obviously purchase your book, which is available on all platforms, but of course Amazon. But I love the story how when you went to this village, you kept visiting, you loved being there, and then when you actually walked into this one place, you just felt as if those walls were speaking to you that this was your place.
Yes, it was such a strange experience, but we had found the village. I'm a writer, a fiction writer originally, and so found this place to set a story. And like you said, kept coming back and just fell in love with the village. Started thinking about we should look around and see, is there something out there that might be easy? Kind of, and we looked at two or three places and just did not feel anything. I mean, they were nice, and
Mm-hmm.
but then we walked into this house and I don't know. It was such a powerful experience. This is a silly little thing, but there were these horse medallions, terracotta horse medallions on the wall in the other room
Mm-hmm.
in here. And we're from Kentucky. I mean, we obviously it's a horse capital of the world. We all grew up around horses. My mother was a big horsewoman, and I grew up in a den with horse stuff all over the place. So it just that's just natural. And this building was an old horse stables. And so
Mm,
when we walked in, there was just something immediately that felt so comfortable and so home-like, even though it was not livable. It was
right.
basically just a glorified barn, but it felt so much like home. And then I thought, okay, maybe it's me. And we kept walking around. The view was just stunning. And then Jess and I went upstairs and to look at this little apartment. And you know how you're not supposed to show emotion in front of the realtor, right? You're supposed to
Right.
act
Don't
like,
get too
oh, it's not that
excited.
great. Yeah. So we're trying to refrain ourselves, and we pass each other in the hall and we just locked eyes, and we both of us were like, wow. I mean, I could just tell that what I was feeling, he was feeling. So
Yes.
it was just kind of neat to know that we were definitely on the same page, and we would need
Mm-hmm.
that for what was coming down the road. It's
Right.
like when people say that they saw their adopted child the first time, they knew that that was their
Mm-hmm.
child, and thank God you do, because you're going to have such
It's
struggles
gonna
down
be
the road.
hard.
It's going to be
Right.
hard.
Yes.
And that's kind of how we felt with this house. It's like we just knew, even though it was going to be a struggle later.
Oh, and then you went ahead and purchased it and did the renovations kind of from Kentucky, going back and forth. And
Yes.
I do love the side of just the history, like you said, with having it probably smells like horses, like you're used to, also deep in
Yeah.
the walls.
Yes. Yes,
Oh,
I do think yeah, the smell. I mean, the whole place, it just felt very comfortable, but also different in such a exciting and new way. And even trying to learn Italian, I feel like it's been such a fun challenge to learn all of these new things in
yes.
midlife, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you talked about just having a sweet relationship with the pastor and his wife. Tell a little bit
Yes.
about that
Yes.
friendship.
Yeah, that was surprising. We actually, when we started looking, we decided to be a part of a church plant here. And there were two churches in Italy through the organization we were looking at. And one was in Rome, and it was already taken. The other one was in Perugia, which is about 45 minutes from us. And so we jumped on that with the help of our church. And so when we came, I said to Jess, I said, well, we're only 45 minutes. Let's try and meet this pastor and his wife. So we did. We met them for dinner, young couple, just sold out to the Lord, and
Mm.
um, really committed to helping this church grow. Fell in love with them. And that then led to meeting his father, who is also a pastor in Siena. And his father is he had formerly done some building contracting work, project managing. And so that was a crazy thing when we realized we did buy the house and thought we could move right in, and then realized, oh no, we need to restore the entire house. It's going to take a year. And then God just provided this pastor
Mm.
who could help us with this project. And the most beautiful thing is not just that, oh, he helped us do this and we, it's more about the friendship that came from that
Mm-hmm.
and the relationship that came from that. And Giacomo, his son, has since gone on with his wife to Paraguay to plant another church, but we're still working with Rocco because we're so crazy. We've actually bitten off a couple of other projects. So we're
Of course.
continue to work together on some more things.
Oh, that's so
But
neat, though. It's never, those relationships are never a mistake. And God knew from the beginning of time, that you would meet Rocco and be connected in
yes,
Italy, even though you're from Kentucky. So I just
it
love that
is.
we serve a big God and we all have the opportunity to live a really big story, which is so
Yes.
exciting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just such a blessing to be a part of something like that. And yeah, it makes you excited for what's around the corner.
Right, right, exactly. Well, I know in the pre part of this conversation, we were talking about the pillars that we would emphasize and those being faith and then friendships. And I do think those are woven throughout your book and your story. And I loved how you really did a beautiful job in your book of weaving grief and how just we go through life and we have these beautiful experiences like you're restoring this place in Tuscany, but it wasn't without other things in life that were happening simultaneously, as happened to
Yes.
everybody. And
Mm,
you mentioned just the loss of a dear friend's child and then your
mm,
mother, and just
mm.
how you were able to kind of be restored in your own heart through that process. Can you unpack a little bit about that?
Yes. I think that process of just having this great excitement and great, you want to pinch yourself when you even travel to a place like Italy that you get to stand in this ancient land and
Yes.
participate even for a few days in this incredible beauty. And then to actually buy a house, that is an incredible opportunity and so exciting. And then at the same time, you're witnessing these tragedies and then the sadness of a parent declining. And it just is such a reminder. It was a lesson for me that we just are not. I think our hearts are always seeking Eden. I think I put this quote in the book by Tim Keller. Our hearts are seeking home. We're seeking
Mm-hmm.
the Garden of Eden. We're seeking this perfect place
Mm-hmm.
that we can either try to create ourselves. And I'm an artist basically at heart, a writer, and so and a designer. So I'm always trying to create this beautiful space or create some beautiful picture through words and details. And it was this major recognition that my heart was longing for this place that I will not have until heaven.
Mm-hmm.
But yet the fact that we have this deep longing is such a wonderful reminder that it's real and
Yes.
it's there for a reason, and that's not a
Mm-hmm.
bad thing. But that in this life we're always going to have it's joy and sadness is always going to
Mm-hmm.
be this tension balance, always going to be juxtaposed with each other. And we just don't need to question, well, why is this happening now? Which I tend to want to do. I think,
Sure.
oh my goodness, I want to just enjoy this moment. And why is this other thing happening? But that's just how life is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very, very true. You remind me of one time we were traveling and we were in Florida and we were so excited because my daughter's wedding was just around the corner and we had flown out and put the clothing in the house in California, and it has like a separate, studio that we converted in the garage. So I happened to see this guy that lived right in our neighborhood. And I don't know why, but I thought to give him my phone number. Like, if you see any problems, when we're gone, let me know. And I see his number when I was in Florida. And, again, we're so excited about this beautiful wedding that's around. corner. And he's like, "Hi. Oh, yeah. Thanks for picking up. I just didn't know if you wanted to have the water running from your house into the street. I'm seeing it come from the studio, like under the gate and the fence." And I was like, no, that wasn't really the plan. Can I give you the code to go inside and tell me, what is happening? And so fortunately, I answered the call. Fortunately, he called me and he goes in, and we had been renting the main house out as an Airbnb, and the cleaner had like stuffed the washer in the studio super full. And so it was just streaming water. I mean, it was like 3 feet deep in the studio. But the great part was all the wedding clothes were in the room next to that, and nothing was touched. And, we had to tear out the drywall, put in all new flooring, do all the things. And, it is the same thought. You're just like, why? Like, why right now?
I know.
So that's just often.
I remember a woman told me, she was one of my readers. She reached out and she was telling me, which this breaks my heart, but she said that, I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's not funny, but she had her daughter's wedding. She was so looking forward to it. Everything was she was so excited. She had her gorgeous dress and she was going to dance all night. And then she got there and she was taking her father and really trying to make sure he got COVID and then she got COVID. So the night of the wedding, she is laid up in the bed, just so sick. And and it just broke my heart. And I thought, you poor thing. I mean, there's this joyful thing and then this awful things happened.
Right. And I know. And just like every year we get better at dealing with adversity. We get, by surrendering, obviously, but I think I'm better now than when I was 30. I hope I am. It doesn't surprise me as much anymore. It's sort of like, okay, here's now the latest challenge. And what am I supposed to learn from this? And how are you going to provide, Lord? And just giving it all back to him. Instead of, like you said, I think our natural tendency is to just expect it to be the Garden of Eden here and no mosquitoes. Everything is perfect, but it's not going to be that way.
And it's not going to be that way.
Right. Okay. Well, the other piece that I think that ties to that I loved in your book was you kind of mentioned about demolition and how you needed the Lord to sort of tear you down in some ways as he was tearing down the place you were restoring in order to effectively rebuild a place of beauty. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So at that point in my life, well, first of all, I am a driven person. I'm a bit performance based. And I wasn't one that was like a straight A student. I mean, I was a good student, but I wasn't one that, I have to be perfect and grades or anything like that. But I just like to always have been intentional with my life. I want to do lots of things. I'm interested in lots of things. I love to travel, love to create, love to start this, start that. And so I've always just been kind of always busy, but in a way that I liked, as long as it kind of stays here. But then frequently, you're like this. And so at that point in my life, we bought this house and then basically bit off this massive renovation in 4,000 miles away in a different language, currency, metric system. I mean, measurement system, everything was different. And so I did not have that margin in my schedule. And at the same time, I was also in the middle of really in the weeds on a lot of the businesses we had started. And I learned about myself. I'm a creator. I'm a starter. I'm not a manager. And I really am much more of the artist versus the entrepreneur that my husband is. And so I think for me, it was more about just the starting of these things. But then I would just get down into the weeds on all this stuff and feel so overwhelmed with all of these things I was not gifted at doing. So I was kind of in the middle of all that when we bit off this huge project. And so I was just so overwhelmed, which is a state that I lived in part of the time and most of the time. And realizing that this why do I do this to myself? I never had really taken the time to kind of chase that down until we got in the middle of this project. And I started, and my father had died a few years before. So I had started kind of peeling a few layers back after, when you
Mm-hmm.
lose a parent, I think you start revisiting your childhood and maybe why did I do this? Why did I do that? Or why, what's motivating me?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that goes back to your family of origin? And I think as we started on this project, I remember walking in one day and I had already started the process of trying to peel off the layers a bit. And the way I'd always dealt with it is just, oh, let me just have another goal. Okay, I'm just going to power
I'll
through
just
this. I just need
achieve.
to do, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
need to do better. I'll just work harder and just push through. Well, one day I walked in and I saw that the house was just a wreck. We had started the demolition. It was dirty, dusty, huge pile of rubble on the floor. You could hardly walk. You'd twist your ankle on the rocks and all the junk. But I looked over and there was this gorgeous 15th century wall. And then you see it. This is not the actual arch, but you see a little bit of this arch
Uh-huh.
here,
Uh-huh.
just
Yep.
bigger. And it was beautiful. And I thought, oh my goodness, that was underneath all that junk. And
Wow.
it just hit me that you cannot restore until you do the demolition. I know that
Mm-hmm.
as having restored multiple properties, you cannot slather new mortar on old junk. You've got to tear off the old, fix what needs to be fixed and put new on. And it's a simple rule and it's not rocket science, but at the same time, I just started realizing it just hit me that that's exactly what I had been doing to myself all these years with my performance is let me just make a new goal. Let me make a new plan. Let me just if I can just do better in this one area, then I can get over this hurdle. Or if I can just get to the end of this busy period, then I'll have rest. There's
Right.
always if I can do this, if I can
Mm-hmm.
do that. And I realized that I needed to stop doing that. And just like this wall in this house here, I need to start peeling off that old plaster, that old dust and dirt and get what is my identity based on? Who am I? Why am
Mm-hmm.
I feeling the need to do these things? And so that sent me on just an even, like I said, I already really had started the process, but that sent me on a deeper journey to just get to the bottom of that and find out. And through prayer, through scripture, through asking the Lord to reveal to me. And that process is what really brought about my restoration as we were restoring the house.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is beautiful because you're so right. I mean, if you're going to, restore a house and the foundation is not solid, you've got to make those repairs. If you're going to try to show the beautiful beams that were covered by drywall all the years later, it's going to take hard work to get to that, but the beauty
Hmm.
is there and uncovered once you do that. And I think you're right. Like in the busyness of the Western society lifestyle, we are just racing from here to there, and again, it's always honored that how are you? I'm busy. Oh, that's so great. No, well, it's
Yeah.
really not that great.
Yes.
and, and just knowing, we have this one life to live, and how taking that time to uncover, why do we do what we do, and what's motivating us, so that we can, honor the Lord with our lives. He tells us to take a Sabbath once a week, and there's good reason. When we're able
Mhm.
to honor that and choose to honor that, then it does feel like He, maximizes the time of that week going forward. You gave Him one day, and He takes those hours, and it always feels like the next week is so much more productive. Whenever I fly back on a Sunday and then I just kind of feel like I miss that rhythm, I don't
Mhm.
enjoy it as much. I just kind of then am starting the race, early on a Monday, going, wait, I didn't have that time to just sort of slow down
Yes.
before the next week. So we do it to ourselves, but it's good that you could recognize that and see the parallels. And I think you are such a gifted writer to be able to weave the spiritual truths through your story. And you're also a fiction writer. And tell the listener about your trilogy.
Yeah, so I started the first three books I wrote before Restored is a trilogy called Grounded, Guarded, and Granted. And Grounded is about a flight attendant from New York City who loses her job and basically is forced to move back home to the farm in Kentucky with her grandmother. And it's two women, different generations, learning to navigate life with one another because the grandfather had passed away 2 years before, who was kind of the buffer. So it was just this figuring all of that out. And that really leads it's humor, mystery, romance. There's some faith in it, of course. I mean, that's the backbone of everything.
Right.
And so there was a little family mystery involved, and then the Guarded takes you to Montefalco, Italy, which is where we are now, and then it wraps up and also in Granted with it's a little Kentucky and a little Italy. So
Oh,
it was fun. I
well,
miss my characters. I want to get back to them one of these days. I do miss them.
It's so true. I finished your first book, Grounded, but I haven't read the other two. But really enjoyed how you wove the Kentucky piece, and then it sounds like this character is getting ready to go to Italy. So I'm excited to see how
Yes.
that is woven in, as you said in your Restored in Tuscany book that you were trying to write that while you were there visiting the
Yes,
village before
exactly.
you visited. So beautiful how.
Exactly.
Yes, so
Well,
gifted.
and there's a little World War II piece, which is very timely. I don't know when the podcast will air, but we're just celebrating the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. And
Yes.
so there's a little bit of that in there as well, which is a time period that's always fascinated me.
Yes, so true. I have a friend that is there right now for the Normandy,
Mm,
yeah, commemoration.
wow.
Yes. Okay, one other piece I want to pull out with the pillars of the family and faith is just how you mentioned in your video with your husband that you always thought you might be a missionary and
Mm,
God had other plans, but you have financially generously supported a number of missionaries around the world and even talking about being involved with this church plant in Italy. So I would love for you to share just how
yes.
God has laid on your heart to be generous to these other groups and how it definitely was not what you thought, but it's been much bigger and greater and better than you could have imagined.
Yes, it's been such a joy. So through and I'm thankful too for Jess and his heart for the same things, and that we are very joined in our love for giving and for other cultures. But we have a couple of key overseas ministry partners currently, and one's in India and the other's Ethiopian. I actually chair the board of it's a small 501c3 called Ethiopian Impact. And so I traveled to Ethiopia probably, well, COVID has kind of messed things up, but usually once every other year for sure, and sometimes once a year depending on what's going on. And then we try to travel to to India as well. My husband is more takes the lead on that one, but the really funny thing about Ethiopia is that out of all the African countries, Ethiopia is the only one that was never colonized, but they
Hmm.
were occupied twice by the Italians. So I can't get away
Really?
from Italy. Yes, and so in Ethiopia, as you may know, you may have traveled there, but there's this Italian influence with the food. There's a traditional injera and all of the wots and the stews. And then they also have pizza and pasta and they have excellent coffee. That's where coffee was supposedly invented, was in Ethiopia, or not invented, but discovered by the dancing goat who was eating the little coffee berries. And then they have these great macchiatos, cappuccinos, and espressos. So it's just kind of funny again how God has
So
woven
funny.
all this together for me.
Yes.
And there's just this common theme. And so, yeah, so we love, so that's been great to be able to have that overseas experience in various places, but especially Ethiopia for quite a few years now. And to be able to take people on vision trips and enjoy and being a part and a partner with ministries there on the ground and doing
Mm-hmm.
various things. And it's just such a joy, such a joy. So that feel very blessed. And again, it's kind of that whole thing I talked about earlier, to bring that full circle, is with my marriage. My marriage did not look like what I thought, as far as when I met a man who had been divorced and 3 teenage kids. I did not know my mission life would look like this, but
Right.
it's been even better and more wonderful. So
Mm-hmm.
again, just being open to how God places things in your heart, but yet allowing Him to make it what He wants it to be.
Right. Right. So wonderful and so true, because I think if we hold on tightly to our own picture or those expectations that are not necessarily God's expectations, for some reason in our mind, we think it should be a certain way. And then he's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, just trust me. I'm going to blow that vision out of the water. But it's going to be way, way better. And I think that's so great. I did not know that about Ethiopia, and I have not visited there. So that's fascinating to me with the Italian influence. I
Yeah.
was mentioning to you on the pre-call that I lived in Sweden during college, and I am half Swedish, but I did not know Swedish until I went to college. One of the reasons I chose to go to UCLA, it was a lot easier to get in then, so you could actually choose where you wanted to go. But they offered Swedish, and so I thought, that's perfect. Let me go.
Really?
Yes. And so I took 2 years every day, 8 a.m. I don't know what I was thinking with that, but finished the 2 years. And then there were like 20 of us from the UC system. So all the UC schools like UC Berkeley, Riverside, Davis, UCLA, we all went to Sweden together the day after our sophomore year finished. And a third of us had taken Swedish for 2 years, a third had taken it 1 year, and a third had no Swedish. And then we had intensive Swedish that summer, and we
Wow.
migrated down to southern Sweden, which was directly across from Copenhagen. And for those of us, that third group, the third of us who had the 2 years of Swedish, we were literally just thrust into the university there in Lund. And everything was in Swedish. Our transcripts, our grades were all counted by these classes. And, I was feeling like, okay, I'm getting there. I'm understanding things. But we were up in the northern part, or like mid Sweden in Stockholm, and they have what they call Stockholmska, which is like the perfect Swedish. It's so lovely and clear to understand. But then down in Lund, it is like the Bronx. So it's got this very thick, it's guttural, it's closer to Germany, and then it's got the Danish influence. So it's super hard to understand. And I remember when I moved on my dorm floor, they called it a corridor. So we each had our own like bathroom, bedroom, but shared a common living room. And these guys were making wine, and they were explaining it to me in Swedish with words I'd never heard of, how to make wine with their Skåne accent. And I did not know what they were talking about. I thought this is so scary. And then the next week, my first class was art history. And I thought, this is so exciting. I'm in Europe. I can't wait to take this class. And so usually, you're learning Italian. So you know how you're watching the person's
Mm-hmm.
mouth, and you're kind of reading their
Mm-hmm.
lips and trying to figure out what
Mm-hmm.
they're saying. So that went out the window, because all of a sudden the professor turned off all the lights. So it was completely dark, and I couldn't read
Oh, no.
anybody's lips. And so we're looking at these beautiful pictures of art, and then she's lecturing. So I turned to the guy next to me with his notes to think that'll help me to understand what he's writing down, but he's Italian. So he's taking his notes in Italian. And I thought, oh boy,
Oh,
this is
no.
really going to be like sink or swim. But it did force me to then really, work on learning the language. And eventually I felt much more comfortable, to the point of, once it was the beginning of that last summer before I was going back for my senior year of college, I said to my parents, I want to stay. Now I know the language pretty much, and I want to stay. They're like, well, you need to, make money for college. So I said, okay. So I got a job as a waitress back up in Stockholm at the oldest steakhouse there in what they call Norrmalmstorg, that is still there today. We visited there last summer, had not been back in many, many years. It was so,
Wow.
so fun. But that was the real, like, I Love Lucy. I thought I'd be fired every day. I'm so sorry that I, did this and that. But, it caused me to start dreaming in Swedish and really, really made it possible. So you
Yes.
talk about like the demolition, the breaking down, I am so humbled. I don't even know what I'm doing or saying, but I'm doing my best with the Lord's
yes.
strength.
No, that is so good though. But yeah, and I feel, I mean, I'm still in that stage here because I'm writing, like I'm working on another book now, and I'm writing in English. And of course, we
Right.
have guests. I'm talking in English, but then we go out. We had dinner with Italian friends 2 nights ago and lunch with Italian friends yesterday. And so I'm trying to have a foot in both worlds. But it's like it's better. I'm improving all the time, but you just still have those moments of total humiliation.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I mean, I don't. I actually introduced my brother-in-law, which is cognato in Italian. I actually introduced him as my Canelio, which means this is. I said his name, and I said this is Earl, my rabbit. And so
Exactly. It's
those are
things like that. Yes.
all the time something.
Yes, yes. Well, and it gives you such a huge appreciation for someone who lives here in America who speaks our language.
It
In fact, I
does.
just I just had an Uber driver from the San Diego airport just 2 days ago, and he was from Iran, and he was so cute. He was 32, and every word he chose in English was so just, careful, as he had perfect
Yes.
grammar. And I said, how long have you been here? And he said, oh, 4 years. I said, your English is absolutely amazing. And he said, oh, I don't think it is. And, he was so hard on
Oh,
himself. And I'm thinking, I don't know anything about how you would speak Persian. So,
yeah.
I
Can
have
you
so much
imagine?
respect for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it
Oh,
is. I mean, it does gives you great compassion because it is really hard.
so challenging. Yes, but I do feel the world, especially with tech, it's so much more global, accessible. The fact that we can even be doing this podcast with you in Tuscany, we're looking at each other as if we're in the same room. It's
Yes.
wonderful, and it makes that world feel very flat and interconnected, and gives us all a bigger picture of what God is doing in and around
Yes.
the world, and how blessed we are that we get to be, a part of it with our lives. Well, I have loved this time with you. I feel like we could talk for many more hours, because I just love how you weave in the spiritual things that you're learning through the everyday life in Italy and in Kentucky. But before we wrap up, how about if you share with the listener your favorite Bible verse, current book that you're reading as an author, and then a recent bargain?
Okay, well, I love my favorite life verse has been Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, to give you a future and a hope. So that's always been probably a life verse for me, even though there are many others that I also rely on, like cast all your
Mm-hmm.
anxiety upon him, because that's another one
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with. But this
Mm-hmm.
one has been sort of that backbone for me. And then let's see, what I'm reading now currently is Corrie Ten Boom's devotional, God is a Hiding Place.
Mm.
And I adore her. And she, these little devotionals every day from her time, and most of it from her time in a concentration camp during World War II, just so motivating and really grows your faith. I mean, just how
Yes.
she lived so moment by moment,
Mm-hmm.
literally not knowing what the next moment was going to bring. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've enjoyed that so much. It's been a beautiful little book. Then my bargain is it's not inexpensive, so, but it is a bargain in that realm. So
Sure.
I love coffee and I love cappuccino. There are a lot of, if you look into like buying a cappuccino maker for your home, there's so many out there. It's overwhelming, and you can spend literally a couple $1,000s on
Yes.
such a machine. But I have found one that I think is an excellent value. It's called the DeLonghi La
Mm-hmm.
Specialista, and you can get it for, I think, around $6.50, which is not cheap. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're in that market, it's a
Mm-hmm.
very, very good price. And I think it's like the best out there because
Nice.
it's a mix of manual and automation. So you
Okay.
don't have to be a real high-end barista, but you do feel like you're doing a little bit for your coffee.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, highly recommend it.
Well, speaking from the Kentucky Italian, I'm gonna
Yes.
go with that suggestion
Okay.
because you know good coffee now. Oh, that's so fun. Well, Angela, just such a treat to be together with you, and thank you for living the generous life and trusting the Lord for what He has for you and the beautiful plans. The Jeremiah 29:11. You're a blessing to all who know you, and I'm really grateful for the connection from the marshes and to have had this conversation with you. And bless just the listeners who get to hear your story. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Kim. It's been an absolute pleasure. The time has flown by.
I know. Well, ciao, Bella, and thanks again.
Thank you,
Bye.
Kim. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.